Bible doesn't start and end on the page. Every chapter tells the tale of real kings, real prophets, world empires, and battles of conquest. The story behind Scripture digs into the history behind God's Word, the moments that shaped Israel, the events that fulfilled prophecy, and the stories of the Jewish people that connect the Old and New Testaments. In today's episode, the most sacred object in Israel's history vanishes without a trace. No record of its destruction, no account of its capture. What happened to the Ark of the Covenant, and why does the Bible go silent about it?
Welcome to this deep dive. We are really thrilled you could join us today because we have something truly extraordinary lined up for you.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about the greatest historical mysteries out there, the ultimate cold cases that have just completely baffled historians, theologians, archaeologists for centuries, really.
The ones that never really go away.
Right. And we aren't just talking about lost treasure today, like gold coins in a sunken ship. We are talking about what is arguably the most sought after, the most fiercely debated, and without a doubt, the most powerful artifact in all of human history. We are talking about the Ark of the Covenant. And today, we are going to give you the ultimate comprehensive briefing on it.
It really is the ultimate cold case. And the sheer volume of speculation surrounding the Ark is it's staggering. It often blurs the lines between rigorous historiography and, Hollywood mythology.
Wow, completely.
But what we are going to do today is look at the actual historical and textual evidence. We're looking at a massive stack of diverse sources to try and piece together the genuine biography of this object.
Yeah, we have a formidable mountain of materials sitting right here in front of us. We are pulling from biblical commentaries, specifically the incredibly detailed chronological work from Dr. Chuck Missler on the books of Jeremiah and Lamentations. We have cutting-edge archaeological field reports from ancient Shiloh and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
It's really fascinating stuff in those reports.
Mind-blowing stuff. We are also looking at literary critiques from Harvard Dayash that analyze the Ark's evolving role within ancient Near Eastern texts. And because we want to cover all the bases for you, we are critically examining some of the most famous fringe theories, too, including Graham Hancock's controversial investigations into its potential whereabouts.
It is a phenomenal stack of research. And our mission today is to synthesize all of this for you. We want to unpack the Ark's dual nature. Throughout these texts, it serves as a sacred reliquary, a container of covenantal documents. But it is simultaneously described as a highly unpredictable, deeply terrifying weapon of war.
A weapon.
Exactly. We are going to trace its entire existence, from its construction in the Sinai wilderness to its eventual transition into a domesticated artifact within Solomon's temple. And finally, we will critically examine the surviving clues about its final resting place.
We're basically going to treat this almost like a biography. We're tracking the life of the Ark from its divine birth on Mount Sinai all the way through its wild youth, its midlife crisis, and its sudden, inexplicable disappearance from the historical record. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the beginning. The birth of the Ark on the mountain.
What makes this deep dive so fascinating right from the start is how the Ark evolves in these ancient texts. It begins its life as a nomadic warrior, this wild and untamable force, and only later becomes a domesticated relic. But its origin story is rooted in the very genesis of the Israelite nation. According to the texts, the Israelites have just fled their captivity in Egypt. They are in the Sinai wilderness, and they experience a massive theophany.
A direct, terrifying encounter with the divine.
Right, on the mountain.
Yeah, and the narrative establishes that Moses receives the blueprints from Yahweh during this theophany. And these aren't just vague theological concepts, right? They are highly specific architectural schematics for a movable tabernacle, a tent to house the divine presence so it can travel with them. And the centerpiece of this entire operation is the Ark of the Covenant.
The absolute center.
The primary purpose, at least as outlined in these initial blueprints, was to serve as a container. It was built to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, which represented the literal suzerain vassal treaty between Yahweh and the Israelites. Later traditions also mention it containing a pot of manna and Aaron's rod that budded.
But beyond just being a storage box, it was designed to function as the earthly communication device.
Yeah.
The nexus point where the divine presence would intersect with the physical world.
Like a hotlines to God.
Yeah, precisely. The text specifically states that Yahweh would speak to Moses from between the cherubim above the mercy seat.
Well.
But Analyzing the physical description of this object brings us to a really fascinating textual intersection.
Oh, this is wild. If you are picturing the Ark right now, you are probably visualizing the shiny gold box with the winged figures on top, right? Like Indiana Jones.
Everyone does.
But our Harvard Dash source points out a massive biblical contradiction regarding what the Ark actually looks like. It depends entirely on which literary source in the Hebrew Bible you are reading. It's like a tale of two arks. If we look at Exodus 25, which scholars attribute to priestly literature, the Ark is described as splendidly ornate. It's built by a master craftsman named Bezalel. It's made of acacia wood, but it is completely overlaid with pure gold, both inside and out. It features the mercy seat, or the capare, a solid gold cover, flanked by two magnificent gold cherubim with their wings outstretched.
It is a regal, majestic, incredibly heavy piece of golden furniture. The priestly source emphasizes the opulence and the precise ritual purity required for the divine throne.
Yep.
But then you flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 10, and the description is completely different. Moses recounts the building of the ark, and he describes it as a remarkably plain, simple wooden box.
Just a wooden box.
Yes. He says he made it himself out of acacia wood, specifically just to hold the tablets. There is absolutely no mention of gold plating, no solid gold mercy seat, and no golden cherubim. It is strictly utilitarian.
It's crazy. You have a golden masterpiece in Exodus and basically a plain wooden crate in Deuteronomy. And medieval Jewish scholars actually proposed a very elegant theory to harmonize these two conflicting accounts.
They did.
They suggested that perhaps there were actually two arks functioning simultaneously. The theory posits that Moses built the simple wooden box on the mountain to hold the broken tablets, the first set that he smashed following the golden calf incident. This plain wooden ark was the one taken out into the battlefield, the one that traveled with the army.
Makes sense.
Right. Meanwhile, the ornate, solid gold one built by Bezalel was kept safely tucked away inside the inner sanctuary of the tabernacle and never risked in combat.
That harmonization definitely addresses the practical reality of dragging a solid gold chest into a muddy war zone. I mean, it would be a logistical nightmare.
And a huge target.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
But from a modern literary criticism perspective, as highlighted in the Harvard Descartes analysis, the authors of the Deuteronomistic history might have been mythologizing a plainer version of the ark that existed in their own time. They may have been looking at a simple wooden box in their sanctuary and writing an origin story that validated that specific form.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas the priestly writers of Exodus, writing perhaps at a different time or with a different theological agenda, likely during or after the Babylonian exile, they envisioned a much more glorious, regal throne for their deity, reflecting a more established, wealthy temple cult that they wished to restore.
Regardless of whether it was plain wood or solid gold, the cultural context of the Late Bronze Age is crucial here. The Israelites didn't exist in a vacuum. They had just spent generations in Egypt. And Egypt at this time was absolutely steeped in a specific religious vocabulary. They believed in angelic snake spirits that spit fire, demons that could be trapped in physical objects, and gods that were carried in procession.
Very tangible, localized magic.
Right. And the Ark of the Covenant essentially takes many of these prevailing Egyptian concepts and flips them to create a distinctly new Israelite religious meaning.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Israelites are taking the cultural vocabulary of the era. The idea of a portable divine throne, a sacred reliquary carried on poles. And they're using it to establish the presence of Yahweh. But Yahweh is fundamentally different from the Egyptian pantheon.
How so?
Because he is invisible. He cannot be represented by a carved idol, and he demands a strict moral covenant, hence the tablets inside, rather than a statue of a god.
Right. Now, because of these deep Egyptian roots, there are some incredibly wild theories regarding the Ark's true origins and power.
Right.
And this brings us to Graham Hancock's famous and highly controversial book, The Sign and the Seal. Hancock leans heavily into the fact that Moses was raised as an Egyptian prince, educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Hancock takes that and suggests Moses was essentially tutored in high-level Egyptian sorcery and advanced alchemy, using this knowledge to construct the Ark not just as a religious symbol, but as a literal weapon of mass destruction.
It's a very compelling narrative for a thriller. And Hancock's explanation for the Ark's lethal power is that Moses somehow located radioactive meteorite material while wandering in the Sinai wilderness.
Radioactive, wow.
Yes. Hancock suggests this radioactive material caused the burning bush phenomenon, and that Moses placed this radioactive rock inside the Ark. He argues this perfectly explains the descriptions of Moses' skin glowing after descending the mountain and why the ark later causes horrible skin diseases, tumors and sores to anyone who gets too close.
So he's essentially framing the Ark as a radioactive dirty bomb housed in a lead-lined or wood-lined box. We want to impartially present the evidence to you, so let's look at the rigorous critique of this theory, provided by biblical scholar Dr. Michael Heiser. Heiser acknowledges that Hancock makes some interesting visual connections. Hancock visited the Cairo Museum and noted the gold shrines of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, which are nested wooden boxes overlaid with gold carried on poles.
Visually, very striking.
Yeah. He also points to the ancient Egyptian festival of Opet, where sacred barks or shrines were carried in elaborate processions. Visually, there are undeniable similarities to the Ark's design and transport protocols.
The visual parallels are certainly present, which is, well, it's to be expected given the shared cultural milieu of the ancient Near East. They were all speaking the same visual language, so to speak. But Heiser dismantles the core of Hancock's radioactive weapon theory using chronological and linguistic evidence.
Break that down for us.
Well, Hancock argues that Moses used the radioactive power of this meteorite to unleash the plagues upon the Egyptians. But Heiser points out a glaring chronological flaw in the biblical text. The plagues of Egypt occurred before the Israelites ever reached Mount Sinai.
Oh, right.
And long before the ark was ever constructed. You cannot retroactively use a weapon to cause plagues if the weapon hasn't been built yet.
That is a pretty massive hole in the timeline. And Heiser also attacks Hancock's linguistic methodology. Hancock tries to link the Hebrew word for the ark, which is Aaron, directly to Egyptian linguistic roots to prove its Egyptian alchemical origin.
Right.
But Heiser demonstrates that this completely ignores the basic rules of Semitic philology. The Hebrew word Aaron derives from a common Semitic root meaning to gather or pluck, referring simply to a gathering box or chest. It does not share an etymological lineage with the Egyptian terms for sacred chests, such as DBN or H8ANO.
So the textual and chronological evidence simply does not support the idea that the ark was an Egyptian radioactive superweapon designed by an alchemist Moses.
Okay, so we can set the radioactive meteorite theory aside.
Right. But while we set that aside, the historical texts undeniably view the ark as a supernatural weapon. It was a localized concentration of divine power.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the ark in its prime. During the 40 years the Israelites wandered in the desert, the ark is depicted as a nomadic warrior. It doesn't just travel with the camp, it acts as the vanguard.
It leads the way.
Yeah. When the massive Israelite camp moved, the ark went ahead of them, seeking out the resting place and clearing the path. And the protocols for handling it, they were terrifyingly strict.
The rigid protocols really emphasize its perceived danger. Only specific priests from the tribe of Levi, the Kohathites, were authorized to carry it. And even they could only transport it using long poles inserted through the gold rings on the sides.
They couldn't touch it.
No. They were forbidden to touch the box itself. When the camp settled, it was placed in the innermost room of the tabernacle, shielded by a thick veil. The text repeatedly warns that unauthorized sight or touch would result in instantaneous death.
Just boom, gone.
Exactly. It was the ultimate symbol of raw, unapproachable divine holiness. Almost as if it emanated a lethal, high-voltage spiritual electricity that was fundamentally incompatible with human impurity.
We see this power unleashed most dramatically when they finally cross into the Promised Land, specifically during the Siege of Jericho in the book of Joshua. This is where the ark truly earns its reputation as an unparalleled weapon of war.
The Battle of Jericho.
Yeah, and the narrative of Jericho is profoundly unusual from a tactical military standpoint. Jericho is a heavily fortified Canaanite city, a massive obstacle blocking their entry, but the strategy Yahweh dictates to Joshua involves absolutely zero traditional siege warfare.
Not at all.
No battering rams, no scaling ladders, no starvation tactics.
The entire strategy is centralized around the ark.
Cool.
For 6 straight days, the Israelite army marches around the walls of Jericho one time. The march is silent, save for 7 priests blowing 7 ram's horns, walking directly in front of the Ark of the Covenant.
It's pure psychological warfare.
It is, but deeply theological in its execution. On the 7th day, the protocol shifts. They march around the city 7 times. On the final lap, the priests blow a long blast on the horns. Joshua commands the people to shout, and the massive, impenetrable walls of Jericho simply collapse.
The Harvard Days H analysis highlights a crucial insight here. The Ark is doing the heavy lifting. It clears the obstacles. Earlier, it parted the waters of the Jordan River so they could cross. Now, it is breaking down the walls of a fortified city so they can traverse the borders.
It's an active participant.
Exactly. The victory at Jericho wasn't a military victory. It was a covenantal victory. The walls fell not because the Israelites had superior siege engines, but because the divine presence housed within the Ark fought on their behalf. It proved that Yahweh was honoring the suzerain vassal treaty contained within the box.
The Ark is really at the apex of its power here. It's functioning as a conqueror. But as we move forward in the historiography of ancient Israel, the narrative takes a dark turn.
It really does.
We enter a period which the Harvard source brilliantly categorizes as the Ark's midlife crisis. It is an era characterized by divine rage and loss of control.
Yeah, after the conquest of Canaan, the Israelites entered the period of the judges. They aren't a unified kingdom yet. They are a loose tribal confederacy, highly localized and fragmented. During this era, the Ark eventually finds a semi-permanent resting place at a sanctuary in Khirbet Salin, universally known as Ancient Shiloh.
Shiloh, yes.
The tabernacle tent has been set up there, and the Ark is overseen by the high priest Eli and his two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who are depicted as deeply corrupt. They're stealing the priestly portions of the sacrifices and abusing their authority.
What's fascinating here is the modern archaeological corroboration of this specific site. Dr. Scott Stripling and his team from the Associates for Biblical Research have conducted extensive excavations at the site of ancient Shiloh.
And what did they find?
They uncovered the foundations of a monumental structure dating to the Late Bronze and Early Iron Age. Within this structure, they found a massive interior wall that divides the building into two distinct areas. When they measured the proportions of these divided areas, they matched perfectly with the dimensions of the tabernacle, as described in Exodus 26.
Wow, so the location of this dividing wall aligns exactly with where the heavy veil would have hung, separating the outer holy place from the Holy of Holies, the exact spot where the Ark of the Covenant would have rested.
Precisely. And Dr. Stripling's team even found massive bone deposits outside this structure, disproportionately featuring the right sides of the animals.
Which means what?
Well, it perfectly aligns with the biblical mandate that the right shoulder of the sacrifice belong to the priests. They have effectively mapped the architectural footprint of the tabernacle in Shiloh.
That is incredible. Finding the tangible historical reality of this sanctuary really grounds the subsequent catastrophe. So, the Israelites are locked in a brutal geopolitical struggle with their arch-enemies, the Philistines, who control the coastal plain and possess a monopoly on iron weaponry. At the Battle of Ebenezer, the Israelites are suffering heavy casualties.
They are losing badly.
Very badly. So the elders decide on a desperate tactical shift. They order the Ark of the Covenant to be brought from Shiloh directly to the front lines. They treat the Ark like a magic talisman, assuming that manipulating the physical object guarantees the compliance and protection of the deity.
It is a fundamental theological error, and it backfires spectacularly. The Philistines fight harder, the Israelites are slaughtered, the corrupt priests Hophni and Phinehas are killed, and the unthinkable happens.
Philistines capture the Ark.
Yes, the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant. The news of this catastrophic loss, the idea that the glory, the kavod, has departed from Israel, is what causes the aged high priest Eli to fall backward off his chair at the city gate and die.
The Philistines take the Ark back to their territory as the ultimate trophy of war. They place it in the temple of their chief deity, Dagon, in the city of Ashdod, visually demonstrating that Dagon has defeated Yahweh. But this is where the Ark's divine rage manifests.
It goes completely berserk.
In captivity, the Ark operates as a completely independent, uncontrollable supernatural force. It utterly refuses to be subordinate. The morning after they put the Ark in Dagon's temple, the Philistines find the heavy stone idol of Dagon fallen flat on its face before the Ark.
Like it's bowing down.
Exactly. So they set it back up. The next morning, Dagon has fallen again, but this time his head and hands are severed on the threshold.
The Ark is engaging in localized iconoclasm within the enemy temple, but it escalates far beyond vandalism. The Ark unleashes horrific physical plagues on the Philistine population.
Right.
The text describes a sudden outbreak of severe tumors, potentially an outbreak of bubonic plague, as the narrative explicitly mentions a concurrent plague of rodents ravaging the land. The destruction and panic are so severe that the Philistine lords start passing the Ark from city to city, from Ashdod to Gath to Ekron, and everywhere it goes, death and disease follow in its wake.
The Philistines realize they are housing a weapon of mass destruction that is dismantling their society from the inside. They're desperate to rid themselves of it. They load it onto a cart pulled by 2 cows, include golden offerings representing their afflictions, and send it wandering back toward Israelite territory.
You would assume the Israelites would be overjoyed at its return.
You would think so. But the Ark's rage is indiscriminate. It refuses to be mishandled by its allies either. When the Ark arrives in the Israelite town of Beth Shemesh, the locals rejoice, but a group of them make a fatal error. They look inside the Ark.
A huge mistake.
Whether out of curiosity to see if the covenant documents were still intact, or simple irreverence, they violate the strict boundary of holiness. The text states Yahweh struck down a large number of the men of that town.
The Ark enforces its own holiness. Regardless of whether you are a Philistine or an Israelite, it will not be controlled.
So the terrified survivors send it away to Kiriath Jearim, where it sits in a private house for decades, essentially quarantined.
And this quarantining sets the stage for a massive shift in his biography. We move from a wild, roaming, highly dangerous presence to a concerted attempt to create a domesticated state artifact.
The transition to the monarchy.
Yes. The geopolitical landscape is shifting from the chaotic tribal confederacy of the judges to a centralized monarchy. King David establishes his new capital in Jerusalem on Mount Zion, and he recognizes the profound political and religious capital of the Ark. He needs this ultimate symbol of Yahweh's presence to legitimize his new dynasty and centralize worship in his capital.
David's first attempt to move it is disastrous because he ignores the ancient protocols. He puts it on an ox cart instead of having the Kohathite priests carry it on poles. When the oxen stumble, a man named Uzzah reaches out to steady the Ark and is instantly killed.
The Ark remains lethal to the touch.
But David corrects his methodology, follows the priestly protocols, and eventually brings it to Mount Zion amidst massive, ecstatic celebrations, sacrificing animals every 6 paces.
David brings it to Jerusalem, but it doesn't receive its permanent architectural home until the reign of his son, King Solomon. Solomon builds the magnificent First Temple, a massive permanent structure of stone and cedar overlaid with gold.
Modeled after the tabernacle.
Modeled after the layout of the nomadic tabernacle, but exponentially grander. And the innermost sanctum, the Holy of Holies, or the Devir, is prepared specifically to be the final resting place for the Ark.
Our sources from the Associates for Biblical Research provide a mind-bending archaeological detail regarding this exact location. The expert Lean Rittmeyer, a highly respected archaeological architect, has spent decades studying the bedrock of the Temple Mount.
His work is incredible.
It really is. Inside the Dome of the Rock today, you can see the exposed bedrock of Mount Moriah, the historical location of the Holy of Holies, known as the Foundation Stone. On that jagged, uneven bedrock, there is a unique, perfectly level, rectangular basin cut directly into the stone.
Rittmeyer's measurements of this carefully cut level depression are exact, 1.5 cubits by 2.5 cubits. In modern measurements, that is roughly 2 feet 7 inches by 4 feet 4 inches.
And those are?
Those are the precise to-the-inch biblical dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant, given in Exodus 25. Rittmeyer points out the vital practical necessity for this socket. The bedrock is uneven. If the priests had carried in this incredibly heavy solid gold chest, weighing hundreds of pounds, and set it down on the natural rock, it would have wobbled.
It would have teetered. And Rittmeyer's research points out that without that precise 1.5 by 2.5 socket, a gold box of that weight sitting on jagged bedrock would look completely undignified. For the Israelites, it would have been conceptually inconceivable for the throne of the Almighty God to wobble.
Exactly.
So they carved a specialized, precise emplacement into the bedrock so the Ark could rest perfectly stable. It grounds this highly mythologized object into a stark physical reality.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this physical grounding mirrors a profound theological shift. The Israelites are effectively institutionalizing the divine. They are taking a dynamic nomadic force, a deity who moved with them and fought on the front lines, and domesticating it within a static, state-controlled architecture.
Locked inside a room.
He is locked inside a windowless stone room, accessible only by one man, the high priest, on one day of the year, Yom Kippur. The Harvard source notes that after 1 Kings 8, when the priest placed the Ark in the Holy of Holies and the glory cloud fills the temple, the Ark is barely mentioned in the historical narrative again.
It just fades out.
The vibrant, dangerous character we saw at Jericho and Ashdod goes silent. It becomes a retired relic of the state religion.
Which perfectly sets up the greatest mystery in biblical archaeology. The Ark goes into the dark room in Solomon's temple, and eventually it simply vanishes. There is no dramatic battle scene describing its destruction, no account of it being melted down. It just disappears from history. Let's lay out the ultimate cold case timeline for you.
The timeline is the absolute key to evaluating the myriad theories of where it went. The first temple was built by Solomon around 950 BC. For the next 3 centuries, the kingdom of Judah experiences severe religious turbulence,
Ups and downs.
oscillating between reformist kings and highly idolatrous kings. Some of these kings, most notably Manasseh, engaged in severe desecrations. He actually placed pagan idols inside the temple precincts. It is widely theorized by scholars that during these periods of desecration, faithful Levitical priests secretly removed the ark from the Holy of Holies and hid it to protect it from defilement.
This brings us to the very last confirmed, undeniable sighting of the Ark of the Covenant in the biblical text. 2 Chronicles 35.3. The year is 623 BC. The righteous King Josiah is enacting sweeping Deuteronomic reforms across Judah. He is cleaning out the temple, centralizing worship, and he issues a direct order to the Levites. He says, "Put the holy ark in the house, which Solomon the son of David, king of Israel, did build. It shall not be a burden upon your shoulders."
That single verse is the linchpin of the ark's timeline. It clearly implies that the priests have been carrying it around or hiding it outside its proper place, and Josiah is ordering them to return it to Rittmeyer's bedrock socket in the Holy of Holies. Therefore, we know with historical certainty that the ark was alive, intact, and present in Jerusalem in 623 BC.
But just 37 years later, the geopolitical hammer falls. In 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, breaches the walls of Jerusalem. They burn the city to the ground, and they completely dismantle and destroy Solomon's temple. If the Babylonians capture the ultimate prize, the solid gold Ark of the Covenant, you would fully expect it to be the centerpiece of their victory parade.
A testament to Marduk's triumph over Yahweh.
Exactly.
Furthermore, the biblical texts are incredibly meticulous about administrative record-keeping. In Jeremiah chapter 52, there is an exhaustive, highly detailed inventory of every single item the Babylonians looted from the temple. They list the massive bronze pillars, the bronze sea, the pots, the shovels, the basins, the silver, the gold pans. They literally list the spoons.
But
the Ark of the Covenant is entirely absent from the Babylonian loot inventory.
the most important object in the nation is missing from the ledger. And when the Jewish exiles returned 70 years later under the decree of Cyrus the Great and built the Second Temple, the Book of Ezra makes no mention of the Ark being returned to them, unlike the other temple vessels. The Holy of Holies in the Second Temple was completely empty.
The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century A.D., confirmed that when the Romans destroyed Herod's temple in 70 A.D., Pompey had previously entered the inner sanctuary and found it totally empty.
So what does this all mean? We have a narrow 37-year window between 623 BC, when Josiah places it back, and 586 BC, when the temple is destroyed and the Ark is nowhere to be found. Where did it go? The theories are vast, ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. Let's investigate the primary suspects. Theory number 1. It was taken to Egypt. This is the theory deeply embedded in popular culture, serving as the premise for Raiders of the Lost Ark. The theory is based on 1 Kings 14, which records that the Egyptian pharaoh Shishak attacked Jerusalem and plundered the temple treasures. The theory posits Shishak took the ark to the Egyptian city of Tanis.
It makes for excellent cinematic fiction, but the rigid historical timeline completely destroys this theory. Pharaoh Shishak's invasion occurred in 926 BC, shortly after King Solomon died. If Shishak took the ark to Tanis in 926 BC, it is historically impossible for King Josiah to order the priests to put the ark back into the temple 300 years later, in 623 BC.
The timeline doesn't work.
The Shishak theory contradicts the primary textual evidence.
We can confidently cross Tanis off a list. Theory number 2. It never left Jerusalem. It is still there, hidden in a secret subterranean vault deep under the Temple Mount.
This theory maintains significant traction among Orthodox Jewish groups today. It relies heavily on ancient Talmudic traditions that suggest King Solomon, operating with prophetic foresight regarding the temple's eventual destruction, engineered a complex network of secret tunnels and hydraulic vaults beneath the mount, specifically to hide the ark.
A decoy ark.
Yes, some rabbinic tracts even suggest a decoy ark was built for everyday ritual use, while the genuine artifact remained hidden.
Proponents of this theory point to a cryptic textual clue in 1 Kings 8.8, which, when describing the initial placement of the ark, states that the poles of the ark are there unto this day. Some interpret unto this day as a hidden cipher indicating the ark remains exactly where it was placed, just lowered into a subterranean chamber.
And this belief is so potent that in the 1980s, groups of rabbis conducted illegal clandestine excavations under the Temple Mount, digging through ancient cisterns trying to find it, which caused massive geopolitical friction. But despite the extensive subterranean mapping of the Mount, no Ark has been found.
Theory number 3 takes us outside the city walls, across the Jordan River, the Mount Nebo Cave theory. This narrative is derived from an ancient text outside the standard biblical canon, the apocryphal Book of 2 Maccabees. The text states that the prophet Jeremiah, who was actively prophesying in Jerusalem during the final Babylonian siege, received a divine warning about the impending destruction.
According to 2 Maccabees chapter 2, Jeremiah took the tabernacle tent, the altar of incense, and the Ark of the Covenant, and he carried them across the river to Mount Nebo, the exact mountain where Moses climbed to view the Promised Land before his death.
The text says Jeremiah found a massive cave there, placed the sacred artifacts inside, and sealed the entrance. When some of his followers attempted to mark the path to the cave, Jeremiah rebuked them, prophesying that the location must remain unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. So according to this specific tradition, the Ark is sitting in a sealed, dark cave in the Jordanian desert.
It is a compelling narrative, deeply rooted in the prophetic tradition of preserving the covenant. But despite numerous archaeological surveys of the Mount Nebo region, no such cave has been discovered. Which brings us to theory number 4, arguably the most fiercely defended and elaborately detailed claim in the world today, the Ethiopian claim.
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church officially and unequivocally asserts that they currently possess the original historical Ark of the Covenant. They claim it is housed in a heavily guarded chapel, the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, in the northern city of Aksum. It is guarded by a single monk, the guardian of the Ark, who is appointed for life and never leaves the compound.
But how did it theoretically get over 1,000 miles south to sub-Saharan Africa?
There are 2 distinct historical pathways proposed.
Right. The traditional Ethiopian epic, the Kebra-Nagast, the Glory of the Kings, posits that it happened during the golden age of King Solomon. According to this text, the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon in Jerusalem. They had a son named Menelik. When Menelik reached adulthood, he traveled to Jerusalem to visit his father.
And what happened then?
Upon his return to rule Ethiopia, Menelik's companions secretly stole the real Ark from the Holy of Holies, leaving a replica in its place, and transported the genuine artifact down the Red Sea to Africa, establishing a new Zion.
However, as we just established with the Josiah timeline, if Menelik stole it during Solomon's reign around 950 BC, Josiah couldn't have had it in 623 BC. This is where Graham Hancock re-enters our analysis. In The Sign and the Seal, Hancock offers a vastly revised, highly detailed geographical timeline to support the Ethiopian claim while respecting the biblical timeline.
Hancock suggests that faithful Levitical priests smuggled the Ark out of the temple during the bloody idolatrous reign of King Manasseh around 650 BC, specifically to save it from desecration. Hancock traces an incredible, meticulously researched migratory path.
Down into Egypt.
Yes. He theorizes the priests took the Ark south into Egypt, traveling up the Nile to an island called Elephantine. We know from the Elephantine papyri that a significant Jewish military garrison and a fully functioning Jewish temple existed on this island for centuries. Hancock suggests the Ark rested there for 200 years. Then, as conflicts arose with local Egyptian priests of Tum, they moved it further south, following the Nile tributaries into the Ethiopian highlands, bringing it to an island on Lake Tana called Tanakirkos.
Hancock proposes it stayed at Tanakirkos for 800 years, guarded by a Jewish community, before the region converted to Christianity under King Ezana. At that point, the artifact was appropriated by the Christian Ethiopian Church and moved to its current resting place in Aksum. It is a stunning geographical reconstruction that aligns with the historical realities of Jewish diaspora communities in Africa.
It is a masterclass in historical deduction.
Yeah.
However, Hancock's theory ultimately hits an impenetrable wall of verifiability because the Ethiopian Orthodox Church absolutely forbids any outside scholar, archaeologist, or historian from looking inside the chapel in Aksum. The claim cannot be scientifically authenticated.
We just don't know.
We simply do not know if the object resting behind the veil in Aksum is the actual Ark crafted by Bezalel, a later medieval replica, a tablet, or something else entirely. It remains a matter of deeply held faith for millions of Ethiopian Christians.
Let's shift to theory number 5, which takes the African diaspora concept in a radically different direction. The Lumba people of Zimbabwe. British historian Tudor Parfitt spent years studying the Lumba, a tribe in southern Africa who possess surprisingly strong Semitic traditions, strictly observe kosher dietary laws, and possess genetic markers. specifically the Cohen modal haplotype, linking them directly to Middle Eastern Jewish priestly populations.
Parfit theorized that the Ark was brought south into Africa by these migrating groups. But Parfit doesn't believe the Ark survived intact. His theory suggests that over centuries of rigorous travel and use in the African interior, the Ark was destroyed, perhaps through an internal reaction or the sheer friction of migration.
Wow.
However, Parfit theorizes that the Lemba people gathered the remnants of the original wooden box and incorporated them into the construction of a new sacred object, a massive ritual drum called the Ngoma Lungundu, which translates to the Box of Thunders. Parfit argues that the sacred drum of the Lemba is the direct descendant, the physical and spiritual reincarnation of the Ark of the Covenant, carrying forward its legacy of divine power and acoustic warfare.
It's a fascinating anthropological connection, showing how the physical memory of the Ark might have morphed and adapted over millennia of migration. Finally, theory number 6 takes us entirely outside the realm of archaeology and anthropology: heavenly relocation.
For many theologians, the exhaustive search for a physical docks in the dirt of the Middle East or Africa is missing the fundamental theological point. They point to the New Testament, specifically the apocalyptic literature of Revelation 11:19. The Apostle John receives a vision of the end times, and he writes, "And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament."
Taken to heaven.
From this perspective, the ark wasn't hidden by Jeremiah or smuggled to Ethiopia. God simply removed the artifact from the earthly plane entirely before the Babylonians could defile it, translating it into the heavenly spiritual realm where it originally conceptually belonged.
Which perfectly brings us to the prophetic angle of this entire historical narrative. We have to ask, did the ancient Israelites even expect the Ark to be around forever? Was it meant to be an eternal fixture of their religion?
If we look closely at the prophets who lived right around the time the ark disappeared, specifically Jeremiah and Ezekiel, they seem to be preparing the populace for a massive theological evolution. Look at Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. Jeremiah, prophesying about a future messianic restoration, says something that would be utterly shocking to an ancient Israelite whose entire religious identity was centered on that golden box.
What does he say?
He says, "In those days, when your numbers have increased greatly in the land, people will no longer say, 'The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord.' It will never enter their minds or be remembered. It will not be missed, nor will another one be made."
He is radically shifting the paradigm. He is saying that in the future, the religious system will no longer require this localized, highly dangerous physical visual aid. The need for a gold box to contain the divine presence is going to become entirely obsolete because the presence of the Lord will dwell directly among the people. The entire city will become the throne.
We see this exact same theological shift in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel, writing during the Babylonian exile after the temple has been destroyed, receives an incredibly detailed multi-chapter vision of a future perfect temple. He meticulously describes the walls, the gates, the altars, the exact dimensions of the priesthood's chambers. But conspicuously, in Ezekiel's perfect temple, there is absolutely no mention of the Ark of the Covenant.
It's totally missing.
It is completely missing from the divine blueprints. The ultimate implication of both prophets is that the Ark had successfully served its pedagogical purpose. It was essentially a training wheel for a nomadic people to understand the concept of a holy covenant-keeping God. But eventually, the relationship was meant to mature beyond meeting a physical object you could deploy in a battle.
It is the ultimate transition from a localized, container-bound deity to an omnipresent, internalized spiritual reality. The physical disappearance of the Ark forced that profound theological evolution to happen. This has been an unbelievable journey. We have tracked this artifact from its inception, a terrifying, mountain-born weapon of divine power that shattered the walls of Jericho and devastated the Philistines, to its institutionalization as a silent prisoner locked in a magnificent dark stone room in Solomon's temple, and finally to its status as the ultimate ghost of history, spawning complex theories from the papyri of Elephantine to the caves of Mount Nebo.
The Ark truly represents the eternal tension between human attempts to control, contain, and domesticate the divine, and the fundamentally wild, untamable nature of God is depicted in these ancient texts. Every time humanity, whether Philistine enemies or Israelite elders, tried to use it as a talisman for their own political or military ends, it rebelled violently.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to ponder long after this deep dive is over. Imagine if it happened. Imagine if tomorrow breaking news flashed across your screen. The Ark of the Covenant has been definitively discovered and scientifically authenticated. Whether they pulled it out of a heavily guarded Ethiopian chapel, unsealed a hidden cave on Mount Nebo, or dug it up from a hydraulic vault beneath the crowded streets of Jerusalem, how would the modern world, a world utterly dominated by secularism, empirical science, and rationality, react to an artifact whose entire historical biography is defined by its uncontrollable, lethal, and supernatural power?
This raises an important question. Would we simply catalog it, place it behind temperature-controlled, bulletproof glass in a museum, and treat it as a mere archaeological curiosity, the ultimate museum exhibit? Or, if we got too close, would our primal, ancient fear of the divine rage, the exact same visceral terror that plagued the Philistine lords of Ashdod and struck down the men of Beth Shemesh, suddenly return to the modern psyche? It is a fascinating thought experiment about how we, in the 21st century, relate to the concept of raw, unapproachable holiness.
It's certainly something to analyze the next time you see a gold box with winged figures depicted in popular culture. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive into the biography of the Ark of the Covenant. We hope this shortcut to the sources gave you a few profound aha moments today. Keep questioning the historical mysteries, keep learning, and stay curious.
Next time on The Story Behind Scripture, God chooses Israel's first king. He was everything the people wanted, but it doesn't go the way anyone expects. The rise and unraveling of King Saul, and the unlikely shepherd who would replace him. If you'd like to read more about the stories behind Scripture, try Written in Fire, available on Amazon. It's a look at the 15 centuries of covenant, exile, prophecy, and promise, and the one thread that runs unbroken through all of it: God keeps His word. Written in Fire traces the story of Israel from the burning of Solomon's temple to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, through prophets and kings, silence and fulfillment, judgment and hope. Author Mike Benitez weaves together the voices of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel into a single powerful narrative that leads straight to the arrival of the Messiah. The fire that began in Jerusalem did not end in ashes. Written in Fire is available now on Amazon.